Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to get started now. Welcome to everybody. Wanted to go over just a few pieces of information before the speakers are introduced. First, this is one of a series of BSMA webinars which explore best practices and solutions to supply chain challenges around such topics as clinical supply planning, tools and technology, data analytics, IRT, and logistics and trade compliance. Time has been put aside during this event for Q&A. So if you do have a question, feel free to enter that section in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. The chat has been turned off, and we also ask you, there's no need to use the raise your hand feature for a question. Please just use the Q&A section. This event is being recorded. Copies of the recording will be distributed to everybody that has registered and will likely go out within a week's time after the conclusion of this webinar. Also, at the end of this event, all of you will be receiving a survey. We're asking for you to provide your input as to what you thought about this event. So I would appreciate you it will take more than a minute's time for you to answer that question. So with all that said, would like to introduce our facilitator and panelist. First, our facilitator is Andrew Jones. Andrew is a second-year Master of Business and Science student at Keck Institute. He interned at Amgen within their portfolio strategy and management team and is currently doing a school-sponsored project at Macrogenetics. First, speaking after him will be Antonio Tramontano, who is a Senior Director of Life Science Digital Supply Chain at Genpact. He's a life science supply chain consultant supporting clients in their digital transformation. Prior to working at Genpact, he worked for Novartis in IT and clinical supply as head of information and systems governance, responsible for the digital strategy and governance of supply chain systems and data assets. Also on the panel is Ed Heither, PhD, Senior Consultant for Operational Excellence, Argo Efeso. He's a professor of biological engineering and management at Keck Graduate Institute and a clinical professor of decision science and MIS at Drexel University. Ed has taught numerous courses spanning operations management, statistics, quality control, Six Sigma, supply chain management, project management, production methods, and operation research, among others. So before we kick off with the presentation portion of this, we wanted to get a feel for the audience, understand a little more about their background and familiarity with this subject. So I'm going to share and Andrew, I'm going to be looking at you. Can you see the questions? Okay. So if the audience could take a look at these questions and start answering them. And can they see all the questions or just the first one?
We see all the questions.
All four, okay. Okay, they pretty much answered.
Yeah, that was about a minute or so.
Okay. So I'm going to take 10 seconds more and then end the poll, and everyone will see the results. So here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, and then Bill, do you want me to run through the results that we captured?
Yeah, just take a minute if you would and let us know.
Yeah. So in terms of where does your organization currently stand in terms of becoming data-driven, we see 13% saying understanding the basics, 25% say developing analytical tools, 25% are saying partial implementation, and then 38% are saying fully data-driven.
Okay.
When we're talking about which area of clinical supply chain would benefit most from data-driven approach, we're seeing 63% say demand forecasting, 50% are inventory management, 38% are saying IRT and supplier relationship management, 13% are saying transportation and logistics, 63% are saying risk management, and 13% are saying patient experience. And then just some of the big ones from question 3, which was what are the biggest challenges transitioning to a data-driven supply chain? We see 63% saying data quality as well as accuracy, 50% integration of different data systems, and 50% talking about security as well as privacy. And then for 4, 63% are saying increased efficiency. Improved decision making is also that 63%. And then, of course, cost reduction at 50%.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So it looks like a wide spectrum of knowledge and experience on the subject. So this will be good to hear.
Okay. Well, thank you for applying the poll there, Bill. So now we're going to be transitioning into the actual presentation for this morning. First of all, thank you, of course, for being here. I've been given the opportunity to be a moderator here today. So very excited about that, as I have recently got into a clinical supply chain project. So to be able to be involved with a webinar such as this is quite exciting. And then I don't want to go into the actual introductions of Antonio or Dr. Ehrenheider. I think Bill will cover that. But of course, Antonio will be presenting first this morning. So thank you, Antonio, for being here today. And we look forward to hearing what you have.
Thank you. So I would like to start actually from this cartoon because it really captures the essence of how data is propelling the advancement of drug discovery and development. As you can see, the rocket on the left-hand side is fueled by various data-driven steps and technologies. At the base, you have the foundation first, which really underscore the importance of establishing a solid groundwork, and all the steps that are following, like priority use cases, standardized data, shared data, really suggest a progression to a cutting edge innovation. Also, the flying cars in the middle, saying the right data in the right place, really emphasize the importance of accurate data and relevant data. And at the top of the building, you see this figure suggesting that there is a need for leadership to support and to embrace the innovation and technology. Overall, this nice cartoon really is an image, conveys an image of a multifaceted and incremental approach, which is key to accelerate the development of new drugs in this data-driven age, especially if supported by strong foundation and an innovative environment. But data is not just important for drug development. Going into the next slide, the data can be important also for life science supply chain, and really the ability to harness a vast amount of data and technology can really generate many insights that can improve efficiency and efficacy of supply chain operation. Furthermore, new technology, and Ed will talk about this new technology later, can really empower and to anticipate and respond to complex supply chain challenges that clinical supply have to really face every day. So data and technology are really transformative forces that we should leverage in our job. So as such capability are very important for clinical supply. Why? Because clinical supply chain have to deliver the right medicine in the right place at the right time, and this is super important because it can have an implication on clinical trial execution. Only one stock out can really cause delay, can really have a bad impact on the clinical trial execution and also the speed to market. So the agility that data and analytics and new technology can provide not only streamlines operations in the clinical supply, but also contributes to the overall resilience that clinical supply needs to have in this moment of rapid changes. But I think you guys that are familiar with the data and or others that are really at the beginning of it, they really wonder how can we get there, right? Because this is a journey. And I want, before we delve into the digital solutions, I would really talk about data first, and why data is so important. Where is the value of the data? Going to the next slide, please. I think having good data really helps because it helps better data can give better information, and better information can produce better decisions. So when you face a challenge, you would like to take decisions on how to overcome this challenge based on facts rather than gut feelings. And this in turn can really translate into a higher resilience and responsiveness for clinical supply chain. There is a strong need to have good data to analyze inventory and forecast. We could also see this from the poll that we just saw, and there is a strong need for visibility, and also good data can really help clinical supply chain to be always fully compliant and to adapt to all the regulatory requirements that are becoming more and more complex. But to get there, of course, there are many challenges that you can see here on the right side. Of course, it's not the full list, but I would say is the top 6 challenges that I've seen personally and also for other clients that I work for. I would say the number 1 is really the poor quality of the data, the missing linkages, which is producing waste in the process. There is also poor understanding of the value of the data. Sometimes it's just seen like an IT thing or an IT problem, and unfortunately, this also there is also a low ROI immediately when there are projects and initiatives around getting the data right, and as a result, poor sponsorship and ownership, and sometimes you have even too much data, right? This is what is called the drip syndrome, like data-rich information pool. Especially R&D in life science has so much data they don't know where to look to get really meaningful insights. So how to overcome all these challenges, how to get to the benefits. What I would like to suggest and to introduce to you is really an incremental approach that you can see in the next slide. And really starting from the foundation. Remember the cartoon that we saw at the beginning, because I really believe that data is at the core of supply chain digitalization. And I think we need to start always to get ownership and to get data in good shape. And that's why I think that at the core of supply chain, really, there is the data governance. And once you have your data monitored, your data governed and owned, then you need to make this data available by putting them into data platforms, right? So you can store them, you can link them, and once they are linked and stored, then you can start to aggregate them from multiple sources. You can start to use them, to visualize them, and it could be a dashboard, it could be a KPI, and you can start to get some insights. And when you reach a level of maturity, then you can move to the next and final step, which is the data science. And that's really the point where you can really unleash the power and the full benefits that we said before. As you can see, the value on the left-hand side, the value really grows as long as you move on this incremental approach. Of course, there is not a lot of value when you want to start investing on the data governance. There is not an immediate ROI, as we said, but trust me, you really need to start from the foundation first. Otherwise, getting to data science, it will become more difficult, and you will not harvest the expected benefits. So what I would suggest in really few words is really to have an incremental approach. Start from the foundation, make the data available, start to use them, and then you really invest all your effort and all your time in Gen AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all the things that today are really going to revolutionize not just supply chain, but the entire business. So, and also from an analytics perspective, this is also a nice visual, really suggesting that there is a journey that organizations can do, right? There are different stages that you can go through, and in terms of maturity, from a simple descriptive analytics explaining what, so you can basically look at what is happening in your clinical supply, to a more sophisticated intelligent supply chain where you can really leverage the cognitive analytics. Also in this case is a crawl, walk, run, fly approach. And once you get your data right and you start to visualize them, then you can move into more predictive, or prescriptive analytics, where, for example, analytics can suggest what action you can take in case you have a constraint or you have an emergency to solve. Also in this case, it takes some time to get there, but those are incremental stages that you can do step by step until you reach the maximum level of maturity, and you can replicate human thinking just using new technology. But all these things that I'm portraying now are just, like, I would say, the basic ingredients for digital solutions, right? And now, Ed, I think you are going to discuss about what are the solutions that can be used in clinical supply, unless there is some questions from the audience.
I have no questions yet, Antonio, but once they come in for data related, I will send those your way. But yeah, thank you so much for presenting, Antonio. I'm now going to be handing it over to Dr. Aaron Heider to talk about technology trends in clinical supply chains.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, folks. And thank you, Bill and Antonio, for your piece of this. I'd like to pick up along where Antonio finished off. Talking about what is a smart supply chain? Antonio was using a lot of similar terms here. You talked end-to-end visibility, et cetera. Just his last slide showed the journey. He called it the journey for supply chain analytics. And I think this is a sort of a nice tie-in here. What is a smart supply chain? Obviously, it's advanced analytics, as Antonio mentioned. And everybody uses the terms AI and machine learning and so forth. I'll show you a survey in a second where we asked some people about that, and got some interesting results in terms of who is using these particular ideas. Cloud solutions, we've all heard that term before. A lot of us store our data and our photos and so forth on the cloud, and what does that mean? Is that a good place to store all this data? There are options for storage, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes, but just kind of highlighting here the three main areas that really, in my opinion, kind of represent this smart idea, smart supply chain. Go next slide, please. So this is a survey that we did. I've had student teams over the years working on these different issues, and this is one particular survey we did of 30 people that we call key opinion leaders, KOLs, across some mostly biotech people here, where I asked them about their most popular technologies. And you see a lot of the ones that we might suspect here pop up: blockchain, AI, machine learning, Internet of Things, IoT. And it's surprising, though, when you look at this, the results tell us one thing, but the reality is that when you dig deeper, a lot of the people that have awareness of these things and say, oh, yeah, we like blockchain, don't actually use the blockchain technology. They just sort of know about it. It's a less of more of an awareness than it is actually using it. And I say, are these smart tools down here just to get us thinking about that? Obviously they require sophistication. So if you want to call those smart tools, then I guess they are. But the goal here is, in many ways, sort of incorporating automation and analytics throughout the supply chain, and also, I would say, reduce human interactions, right? Eliminate human to run without human interactions. For better, for worse, is kind of where a lot of people are focusing their time here. So this is a result of actual practitioners, again, across and high-level people in certain industries, across a range of of questions here. And I'll reference this survey later on as well. Good, next slide, please. So sort of a similar graphic to what Antonio showed earlier in terms of these industry trends progressing up this stair step of to the future. Here, what we call data-driven, and certainly that's a term we heard earlier as well. We want to make data-driven decisions, and how do we do that? I just said earlier that the KOLs were aware of the need to sort of digitally transform their supply chains, but they may not have actually used it or undertaken the steps necessary yet. And in fact, we found that few companies were looking to make major changes, so they kind of just wanted to use what can they do, use over the next couple of years to make themselves, to take the data, use it to make decisions, increase efficiency, et cetera, without getting into any of the more of the AI and the sophisticated technology I just showed you earlier. Okay, next slide, please. One of the things we use data for, that we have to collect data for, is our cold chain. And I want to bring this up to as an example here. A lot of clinical supply chains and commercial supply chains as well rely on cold chain, and requires more regulations and rules. You have to have a lot of temperature control and data logs and so forth to show that you've kept the items under certain temperature conditions, maybe humidity as well, et cetera. Light sensitive issues might come into play. You might want to track how much light it's been exposed to. And if you don't do all those things, then there's potential for fines and so forth, and license suspensions, et cetera. And sometimes you get these cold chains that, of course, go into remote areas where you're actually carrying the goods on your back and walking up a hill to distribute them. But nonetheless, you want to collect data from these situations. And so how do you do that? We have data loggers we can do that with today that give us a lot of data, as it turns out. Next slide, please. So, for example, I call this recent developments from monitoring, and these are the last few years that have really been coming into play here, been using these things. Again, data loggers, and there are a couple different ways you can do this. Some of these things collect data for temperature only, some do humidity and temperature, some do vibration, et cetera. This one on the left actually does light intensity as well. And the one on the right is a single-use one. You use it, throw it out, and it just does temperature. These are relatively cheap. Now, this is a $30 deal there on the right. Again, single use. And the one on the left is more expensive because it's reusable, about $200. And actually, the one on the left has the ability to transmit wirelessly the data, at least within 100 feet on this example I show you here, where the item is. one on the right, you have to just wait for the data later and plug it into your computer, and then it spits out the results and actually generates a PDF report for you automatically, and so-called plug and play here. So quite handy. On the left, if you wanted more than 100 feet, there are options for that. You can buy devices that give you the data transmission to the cloud, let's say, and you can access from the cloud. So you can be anywhere and access the data more than 100 feet. But usually there's subscription fees for that sort of thing and so forth that charge you. The company that monitors the data would charge you for that. But all kinds of options here for collecting data. And in some cases, can you go back to that, please? In some cases, 10,000, in this case, 10,000 temperature data points on the left, even more than, I guess, 30 or 40,000 data points on that one. So goes much more depending on the device. Okay, next slide, please. There are some usage of also in robotics and cold chain, even in the clinical supply chain world. We've got, again, this is technology that enables us to have more of a hands-off approach to cold environments, so we can reduce risk to people and don't have to have insulated clothing, et cetera. And it makes it more efficient as well in the cold chain storage. So we see a lot of this in the commercial supply chains that have large areas, of course, where things are kept. Commonly not just in biopharma, but also, of course, in food and so forth. But even in the smaller applications, we see some uses of robotics now. And this is something that came up in the survey that I did as well, that I wanted to show you the graph for these people that are using robotics as in a technology-enabled way. You go to the next slide, Bill. And linking back to the data loggers I just showed you, this is an example of a carton on the left, where maybe you package something up, and inside that carton you might insert the data logger. Depending on the value of the item, the $30 might not be worth it. But in this case, let's suppose it's high-end items here, and you have the ability to use a data logger. You probably would stick it in there and then monitor that data, that package as it goes through its supply chain. This is called a passive system because it's simply an insulated box where you put in some sort of gel pack or something to keep things cold. On the right, we call it active because you plug these things in. It might be batteries or it might be plugged into the wall to keep things cold for you. And there are smaller ones available here. I know in the clinical supply chain world, a lot of times it's small batch sizes, small boxes. Cartons aren't as large. Maybe shipping one-off packages to somebody, which requires typically a passive approach to shipping. But those data loggers would be used in both these cases to collect the data you need. Next slide.
Dr. Ehrenheider, there's
Yeah.
actually a question about data loggers, specifically when is the unit level or granularity of the data a concern?
I take that question to mean that they're concerned about, when is it worth putting a transmitter or a data logger on a unit level versus a carton level, perhaps, right? If you have a large box like this and there's several small boxes inside there, then one data logger would suffice, right? But if you have 10 of these cartons inside of a large active container like this, then maybe each of those has to have a separate, if they're shipped separately, each of those might require a different data logger. I think that's the question from what you're asking, Andrew. That depends on the value of the item, right? How much the item's worth and the cost of the data logger. It's similar to having RFID tags on items where, they've barcoding has been around for years, right? But now we look at RFID tags, RFID tags, and depending on the price of the RFID tag, if it's 15 cents, you could put that on the unit level. You could put it on a toothbrush, right? But if you have a very expensive tag, then it's not cost effective. Same thing going on here. I think that particular logger I showed you was $30. Well, not that cheap. Okay, so the idea of that logger being used on low-cost items, obviously on the unit level, would not be practical. So you have to look at the economics of how much your items are worth versus the data logger cost.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that next slide. And then a little more technology where we can deliver and help us with this I call the last mile challenge. You've heard that term last mile, perhaps, and I call it the last mile challenge. You know, the idea that you can get 99% of your way to destination, and then that last mile is sort of the critical point where, you know, don't give up now. Make sure that the product gets there intact and in the right conditions, doesn't get stolen, et cetera, and gets into the right hands, who it's supposed to go to, the end user, whoever that may be. And this is somewhat innovative and revolutionary, but not common. And I say yet, because I think this is going to be in the next, you know, maybe 10 years, much more common. It's not even that expensive anymore, and not even that it's sort of off the shelf stuff now. The question is finding the applications for it. You know, where are the applications? And a lot of times it is remote areas, and maybe in between different buildings in a large campus of a hospital, let's say, experimenting with those sort of things. And it's really ideal for clinical supply chain because it's small. These are small packages, so they're small batch sizes. Each package might be different shape, but small, and you want to be able to get things quickly to the end user without delay. And this is something we see as well. Requires obviously a lot of control from the user, and the data here is in terms of controlling the flight of the drone and so forth to get to the right destination. And people are using this in real life in Ghana and elsewhere, places that are remote, to get drugs to end users. Again, we'll come back to the last mile challenge in a minute. Here, last mile issues, challenges, and solutions. I mentioned before, last mile poses some things, some threats, and one of those, of course, is thefts and during transit. There are people like Sensitech, that pharma company that states from their survey results, 75% of thefts occur during when products are on the road. They left the facility between your source point and your end user. So how can you mitigate some of those things? Well, you can secure packages with products with GPS cargo tracking. You can use discrete labeling, so don't write on there what it actually is. Put some other kind of code word on there. And you really want to reduce the amount of handling that things go through and the parties involved. So the fewer people that touch the package, the less risk, not just from theft, but also from something breaking open, data logger getting falling off, dislodged, that kind of thing. So the fewer people that handle packages, of course, the better off we are. So these are sort of three things. There are other things you might think of that you can do to reduce these threats, but those things came to mind. Go to the next slide, Bill. So what about data? Antonio was talking about, end-to-end visibility being important. That's certainly a challenge. And so the problem is, along the way, we have all these data silos. And I think you're probably familiar with the term silo. This is a data silo. The real question is, how can we break down data silos and store, aggregate, and combine the data to make it useful to make decisions? And so we have all these scattered, in many cases, spreadsheets. I've done work at large companies who still use spreadsheets. This is very recently. And so, although today we can use these Teams, we can use SharePoint, et cetera, to kind of help us share spreadsheets and other things, PowerPoint, Word, and so forth. But it's still not necessarily the best system, right? So information is scattered, challenges to share and access data, and you can't easily pass things between departments. And that's sort of what Tony was talking about earlier. So I do a lot of work in Lean and Six Sigma, and we talk about data silos and those applications to the idea that people are in silos, right? The process is in a silo, and you don't really know about what the person next to you does. Same thing here is the idea of the data silos the data is not being shared. From the surveys that I just talked about earlier, we had a lot of different elements that popped up besides the ones I mentioned, the AI and machine learning and so forth. Recurring elements we see on a lot of these studies is the use of ERP, and people probably know what that one is, quite familiar. WMS, warehouse management systems, there's a lot of those out there now. And then TMS, transport management system, so managing fleets, organizing and planning routes, et cetera. These are commonly used. And of course, the goal will be to integrate all these three things into one. And even though you have these three, they may not be able to communicate, and that's the challenge. So, so the goal really would be in using these things to have a digital platform where you can unify all these things in some sort of collaborative supply chain platform. I'll mention a couple in a minute, but for now, just mention that these three things are still being used, and it depends on your size of your company, your sophistication, which of these three you're using, or if at any. But commercial packages for these exist and are quite readily available now. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so just some options here. I mentioned the term unstructured and structured data here. Just so we're clear, structured data is, things that are nice orderly rows and columns on a spreadsheet. Structured data, right? And that'd be some sort of big, huge, square arrangement, very orderly. Unstructured, emails, scans of something, pictures of something, that kind of thing. Photos, those are unstructured data, and we still want to use that and capture it. Images of things, but how do we then use it? There's just some options that are out there. Most of us have, even on our own home use, we use our direct attached storage, I call that. Sort of the idea of a small business might use this, very cheap in many cases. Prices have come down amazingly on this stuff, right? To 5 terabytes hard drive for under $200, probably even less than that now with sales going on. So storing data in our own sort of local or detachable hard drive is very easy to do. Not a good way to run a big business, right? But small businesses might be useful. Cloud storage, of course, is out there longer term. They tout the data security and reliability of that. Some people have their doubts, but the idea of cloud storage is certainly useful. And most of us have that store things on the cloud all the time on our phones and photos and so forth. The large systems, one out there that I've seen used that is kind of nice is the IBM Sterling supply chain, so-called control tower. This is not a plug for IBM by any means, but they certainly have some nice systems. And they call that end-to-end supply chain, and I think it certainly is with real-time visibility. They say it uses AI and it uses machine learning. To what extent we don't know, but certainly it's interesting to look at that. I gave you a demo video there if anybody would like to look at that later. You want to take a screenshot or something or copy that. You can go and take a look at a nice little demo video on that. It gives you a feel for how you can integrate systems together. Again, ERP with everything else that you've got going on. And data warehouses, of course, you could build your own on site or create one in the cloud, but most people don't have that ability or goal in mind. So those are some options that are out there for the storing data. I think that's my last slide, Bill. I'll wrap up there. And we do have a survey that you can do with the QR code here, but we'll entertain, obviously, but we're not finished yet. We've got questions and answers to come, but if any things come up, Andrew, you can run through those for us.
Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing on that. I just wanted to do a quick pivot here and just kind of share what this QR code is. So at Keck Graduate Institute, one of our graduation requirements are actually doing a team master's project. So right now I'm doing an industry benchmark within the pharmaceutical industry, and would love to pretty much just hear about your numbers potentially. This survey is 100% anonymous. You do not have to provide what company you work for or your own name or contact information. You might have to send, if you do end up taking it, which I hope some of you do. Make sure you send it to your computer, as there's some problems right now with the cell phone version. But yeah, much appreciated if you could just take, I think it's 4 minutes to fill out the whole thing. So yeah, thank you so much for considering filling that out. And then Bill, I think we could potentially dive into some questions for the panelists. I do have one from the audience right now. Can either of you describe a best practice you have seen in integrating the clinical supply chain from the sites or IRTs all the way back to the drug product and then drug substance and API manufacturing, as well as the systems in between? Sorry, that was a lot to throw at you.
You just say grading, Andrew?
I'm sorry.
Did you use the word grading? Grade.
No.
Can you repeat that
Um,
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can take this one.
Maybe Antonio
I
has
Yeah,
yes.
perfect.
So, yes,
Great.
so it's about the integration of IRT with the clinical supply. I honestly, these days I'm still waiting for a standard and harmonized and widely used solution to integrate IRT data with clinical supply. I think there is a strong need for it. I know that SAP is actually working on it, and this would integrate IRT data into their intelligent clinical supply solution management. But other solutions that I've seen around are mainly custom made and really suffering of the typical disease of custom made solution, which is they are costly, they are not standard, they do not promote any type of standardization, and they are very difficult to maintain. I believe actually this is an area where some industry, some companies should really invest, because it's I would say one of the most common pain points for clinical supply organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Antonio. And I think a big aspect right now too is sustainability. So how do you think that leveraging data and analytics supports sustainability within clinical supply or clinical operations?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, but I think
Either one.
Yeah, I can just say briefly that I think that when we look at sustainability, we have to look at it's reducing waste, right? So anytime you can reduce waste, I'll go back to my lean idea, reducing waste. We could talk about lean supply chains and so forth. And so using data to make better decisions to help us reduce waste in terms of excess movement, excess motion, reducing fossil fuel use and diesel fuel and so forth. Packaging waste, all those things. How can you get something quicker to the end user that reduce fewer steps, etc. All those things reduce waste, and therefore, in my opinion, would be improving our sustainability of our system, because waste is waste, including environmental waste. So I think that using data for those situations is just is just critical, and it's all part of that. You can't do it without having data to make data-driven decisions. Maybe we can talk about that phrase in lean systems. We talk about data-driven decisions, because that's how we make our planning. So I think it's a great tie-in.
Yeah, I read one interesting statistical data last year that really shocked me. That was from McKinsey, if I remember well, and saying that 76% of material that is managed by clinical supply and ends into waste. 76%. It's a huge quantity, and I'm sure that looking at the data, perhaps we could, and using all the analytics and a new technology, we could really achieve, for example, better forecasts that could really decrease the bullwhip effect and less production of things that are actually unnecessary. I think that also data can give insights and reduce the number of shipments, especially the expedites. I mean, every pharma company is shipping to thousands of clinical sites. It would be great to design a supply chain that can really put inventory in the right place, also to avoid too much carbon emission, I would say. I think this is one of the area where clinical supply can really play a pivotal role in becoming more sustainable.
Right. Exactly. And small shipments frequently, right? That's something that we like to do
Exactly.
because you have to get to a place quickly and you can't wait. Well, that increases your diesel fuel usage and so forth and transportation costs, and that's waste. Even the data logger I mentioned earlier, the single-use data logger, well, that's great, but it's e-waste, right? You use it once, throw it out. And e-waste is like the worst kind of waste in many ways. And so we've got to think of better ways to track and collect data without just throwing things out, as Antonio says, was it 70% you said or something of the
76, yes.
Yeah. So it's a very high number. Yeah.
It's a very high number, yes.
Perfect. And then just in terms of the typical time frame, when do you think that you could start seeing tangible value from implementing data-driven strategies in clinical supply chains?
For me, I don't think it takes ages. For me, it's something that every organization which has the right amount of put the right amount of effort and the right amount of people can really start to see benefits in matter of months. This is what I see in Novartis when I was working there. Just the fact that we could really clean the data, reduce the number of issues that we were having with system acting not correctly in wrong decisions and so on. When we started to then put this data into an advanced planning systems, then we started to see immediately some reduction in terms of inventory and so on, and this happened in matter of months, not even 1 year. So of course we are not talking about millions and like 500 FTEs equivalent that you can save, but definitely can make life easier to everyone that is really using the data for decision making pretty quickly. So I know that people wants to invest immediately into artificial intelligence and so on, but just doing the foundations right for me can already produce enormous benefits.
So Antonio, I have a question. Sorry, Andrew. Many biotech companies don't have the luxury, if you will, of having sophisticated tools, ERP systems, and what have you. But I did say that most of these companies do have data from various sources, whether it be IRT systems, LIMS systems, QC records of rejects and deviations and so forth, and information from the distributor, information from temp tails, and so on and so forth. So there's all this information that's sort of laying on the ground, perhaps not being used as well as it could. What's the first thing when you talk about crawl versus walk through? For those companies that have this, what's the first thing they should be doing in order to take advantage of this information?
I think these days, with all the technology that is available, I would not invest in, for example, in implementing an ERP and put everything there, because it takes time and is costly. I'm not saying that it's not necessary. It's definitely necessary, but there are more ways, and some is also what you saw in the last slide from Ed, to integrate the data. So you can take data from different sources, structured and unstructured. I would invest into put them into one place, try to link them. I have a single source of truth. There are so many tools that today that can help you to do this quickly and already extract some insights without changing the source system. So I would start from there and start already to get some insights. And then unify the data and then help people to make decisions based on data rather than engaging into also because technology is not the answer, I believe. I think it's also a matter of processes, right? So I would invest also in streamlining the process. Once you have so many data, I would really work on making sure that this data is governed, is owned, and what you look is really and representing what you really deal with. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe you want to add something.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I would think of that comes to mind when I think about my work is we don't want to automate the waste, right? We want to make sure what we collect is necessary and needed and useful, and then we'll maybe automate things and so forth. But a lot of folks just start automating everything, and then you're automating the waste, excessively so. So don't do that. So think about, to your point, Antonio, streamlining the processes and the collection before you start automating things.
Yeah,
I think
perfect.
we have time for one more question, Andrew.
Yeah, sounds good. So just in terms of overcoming the implementation barriers, either of you can answer this one. What do you think are some of the biggest or most common barriers when it comes to actually implementing data-driven solutions within clinical supply chain, and how can you overcome these barriers for entry?
You want to start, Ed, and then
Antonio, go ahead.
Okay. The challenges are those that I already explained before in terms of I know people first of all should not expect immediate ROI on those things. Sometimes investing in data is always linked to some immediate returns. This rarely happens. Main challenges are about lack of standardizations, lack of best practices, integration. For example, with ERT is an example, right? You get data from many of your vendors and different forms, different shapes, and it takes time just to make sense of all these input. What I would recommend is really to start to work on getting the right sponsorship, getting the ownership. Once you get the data, try to work on the quality, and then when your foundation is right, then go and build incrementally, and perhaps already explore some new technologies, and but really focus the majority of your effort on the foundational part if you start really from zero.
Yeah, I would totally concur with that. Ditto on that. I think like a lot of programs, it comes from the top, and upper management support has to come from this if you want it to be successful. And it's not just a technological, gee whiz solution that you can just buy and throw it in there. It has to be supported and integrated from the top. And there is some money involved here, but there are ways to do it for less. I mean, I mentioned the IBM solutions. Well, that's an expensive option, right? But there are other ways to do it, as you mentioned earlier, Antonio, without spending.
Yes.
Without spending a fortune.
Oh, and something that I would add, which is sometimes forgotten, is to invest also on upskilling people, because this is a new thing. And as I said before, it could be perceived like it's someone for a data scientist, for an IT guy. I have to say it's not. We need to make sure that the people in our organization know how to read the data, know how to get information out of it. The so-called data literacy of an organization should be assessed, and if it is low, there should be training courses or other initiatives to upskill people so that they can really use the data in the right manner.
Yeah, excellent. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're just about run out of time. So I first want to thank Andrew, Ed, and Antonio for your presentation. Very interesting and I believe useful. Would like to thank the audience for joining in and reminding them that a few days after this event, you will be receiving recordings of this event. Also, please it shouldn't take more than a minute of your time to respond to the survey that you'll see is at the conclusion here. And the next webinar sponsored by BSMA is going to be taking place in early February. and it's going to be about what the global trade and logistics and trade compliance group has indicated is their top issues and challenges, which are specifically regarding valuation, classification, and country of origin. So more information will be announced on that in January. So with that said, I'm going to sign off, and thank you again, everybody.
Thanks,
you.
Bill. Appreciate it. Take care, Antonio. Thank you, Andrew, for doing
you.
your nice work there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.